Welcome to Trail and Ultra Running Training. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm a strength coach and a running coach, and the whole goal of this podcast is to provide a little more free information so that we can train better and have more fun on the trails. Today, I want to talk about 3 reasons why you should not start strength training. And this is obviously kind of a little bit of a push if you know me, because I am a strength coach, but it's there are instances where it might not be appropriate. And if you like this information, if you like this episode, please share it with somebody else. Please subscribe. Apparently, the subscription thing is really important for whatever reason right now. So if more people click the subscribe button, then more people will see it because it will show it to more people because whatever. I don't know. I'm not a robot. I just try to provide information about running and training so that we can all have more fun. So 3 reasons you should not start strength training. And first, people ask me about my training a lot. And I don't talk a lot about it because I don't find it that interesting because I'm not that good of a runner. But I have been training quite a bit. I've been in a pretty consistent build cycle for somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on what we count as a build cycle. And this week, I am starting to go into a bit of a deload because I need it. And when I run deloads, it tends to be not necessarily a planned thing. It's not like 3 weeks on and 1 week off, 4 weeks on and 1 week off, or whatever. If I put a program out on the internet, there will be a forced deload in there. That's almost never how I work with people. I think I've talked about this on a podcast episode in the past, or at the very least, written an email or 2 about it. But most of the time, life hands you deloads, and you're going to get sick, your kid's going to get sick, your dog's going to get sick, and as a result, you don't necessarily have to plan them. If you've been training long enough, you can honestly just work hard for multiple weeks in a row until you feel like you need one, and then we can take one, right? Because technically, if we're training really well with modern training methods, then we should be hitting kind of all the stuff at all times in different ratios. So we're never completely backing off one, and there's never this massive build towards whatever. It's just work, and it's well-defined, well-designed work to fit you as a human being. So I have recently been doing more of lactate and uphill work, a little less on the top end cardio. As always, there's sprints and strides and whatever put in, and then a couple longer runs a week, and it's been going really well. And my joints just kind of hurt because there's a lot of damage to many of them. So this week I'm taking a deload, which means that all of the stuff will still really be in there, except just at an incredibly reduced volume. So I'm going to cut my volume in about half overall, and then we'll get back to a build next week. And then strength on my end has been a couple heavy things that I've been playing around with, and then just experimentation with weird movements to see what it works, because that's often how I train. So that's where we are this week. People ask me, so I will keep an update if people seem interested. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is the thing I saw on the internet this morning as I was scrolling through whatever, and somebody was talking about fueling in carbohydrates per hour, and then somebody else asked a how much of it was sugar question. And I don't know if it was in good faith or not. I don't really care. The answer doesn't matter because it's all sugar, all of it. Carbohydrates are just sugar. So if you were looking to fuel with carbs, you were looking to fuel with sugar. It doesn't matter where they come from. A potato turns into sugar. Fruit turns into sugar. Honey is sugar. Sugar is obviously sugar. And then if we look into things like maltodextrin or whatever, carbohydrates are sugar, or fiber, which we all know that you don't really want during a race because it digests slower and everything can sit in your stomach. So if we are looking to fuel effectively, you are looking for sugar. Now, different people might need to get that from different places for whatever reason, but trying to pretend like you don't use sugar because you got your sugar from a potato is false. Carbohydrates are sugar. And again, I don't know whether the question was asked in good faith, so it doesn't matter about this person. But there's like, people are more scared of sugar than like my dog is of this podcasting curtain here, which is a lot. He's very afraid of this curtain, and people are very afraid of sugar. Which, if we want to go crazy about something, maybe we should demonize alcohol. I'm not, for the record. I enjoy a little bit from time to time, but I don't have the best relationship with it, and some people have an objectively terrible relationship with it because it's poison. Sugar is food, and it's really easy to overeat food, but we should probably get our priorities in order. So when I hear a podcaster demonizing sugar and telling you it's going to fucking kill you, and then turn around and like sell a wine subscription service, I just can't. Anyway, sugar is fine. Don't eat it all day long if you're really sedentary, but if you're really active, do the thing and it'll be fine. Be responsible, eat fiber, eat a whole food diet, and if you eat sugar during your runs, then you're probably smart. Now, let's get to the point of strength training. And as I said earlier, I'm probably a bit of a hammer to a nail in this situation because I am a strength coach, and I want to call out that bias before I get into this. Like, I spend my days teaching people how to get stronger and lift weights in a way that helps them. So I understand that. But I do think that it is important. But I also think that there are like 3 instances where it might not be advisable for a particular person, depending where they are in their training, what their priorities are, etc. So number 1 would be a professional athlete. And I'm not saying it's not important for professional athletes. So before we like clip that or think it's like a thing, I absolutely think professional athletes need strength training, but like many things with professional athletes, everything is on like a razor's edge of performance and problems because they're performing at such a high level. And there's 2 considerations here when we're working at someone of that level. One is like, don't fuck up the juju, right? Like, that's a real thing. There's a magic to certain people and their training and their performance. And a lot of the time, when we have a professional athlete, there's just a thing that is there. And you don't want to mess with it too much. As a coach of a professional, it is very much like a guiding bumper lane on a bowling ball, letting the person guide the person towards the end goal without messing up the thing that makes them them. This is true for everybody. And I think this is the big thing of a coach. I say this as someone who's like very aware that AI could replace a lot of my job. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And I don't doubt that will happen to some degree, but some of it is the like personal relationship and understanding a human being and like guiding more than forcing, right? You have to understand when the athlete needs a bit of space, when they need to do what they need to do. Dennis Rodman is a very extreme example of this. If you watch The Last Dance, where he just like disappeared to Vegas for 3 days and then they go yank him out of a hotel room, and that is a little far, but people didn't really mess with Dennis because they needed to not screw up his magic, right? And kind of same thing when we look at professional or any high end or any person at all, really. But for professional athletes, we're on this like razor's edge. So off season, probably going to push them heavy. In season, it's going to be my mobility, plyos, bands, and it's going to be movements that might be kind of weird, man. Because like a lot of these people are already really strong. And what we're trying to do is not necessarily make them the strongest person on the planet. We're trying to improve their performance so they can make a bigger paycheck. And as a result, we might be doing movements that look kind of strange. You will rarely hear me advocate for a partial range of motion squat, but for a lot of athletes, especially really high-end athletes, it's incredibly appropriate. And it's incredibly appropriate because it reduces the risk of injury to some degree. It's also very much more sport specific because every time you run, it is not a full depth squat. And then we can get that range of motion elsewhere while like loading the partial really heavy, right? So when we're working, if you're a professional or with working professionals, or if you're just kind of on this like upper end of performance, then strength training is performance, or is important, but it looks kind of weird. And while it's worthwhile, we don't want to like mess up the magic that is anybody's training, right? So this is kind of one of those things where, as much as I appreciate strength work, we have to understand where it fits in the larger picture of a human. And this brings me to number two. Second reason why you might not do this is like all you care about is running and not like your future strength. And I don't say this like as a pejorative or to be mean or whatever. I hung out in the punk community for a long time in my teens, and there's very much a like live fast, die young, leave a pretty corpse mentality of that. And I think runners get there sometimes too. And if that's genuinely you, that's great. Because if you don't really care how you move in your 70s and 80s, if you don't care that your shoulders are too weak to put a bag in an overhead compartment, or that you can't pick up your grandkids, then that's fine. No judgment, seriously. But we also need to realize that that is often what we're trading. Because as we age, it is much, much harder to build muscle mass. So another thing when we look at professional athletes is their career often ends at maybe 40 if they're lucky, probably a lot earlier, right? So we're trying to maximize performance for a very short period of time. And then they could spend the next like 20 years getting really strong if they want to while they go on a speaking circuit. Look at Ryan Hall, great example of like someone who's completely shifted his body the other direction after performing really well at running. Now he's just jacked. And this is the person who's like lived both of these sides of life. And if we are looking at a human who doesn't care about back up. If we look at Ryan, like he's a great example of someone who really only cared about one thing and trained to do that one thing. But because his career ended with a ton of life left, he was able to keep going. Most of us, like in some way, vision training and working and running fairly hard into our 50s and 60s. And by that point, we're seeing such a like degradation in muscle protein synthesis and ability to build muscle mass that we can't really run the same plan. You can't do this when you're done, because this ideally is just part of life. We run, we lift weights, we do things, we keep moving, we take care of kids and dogs and whatever. And it's just all part of the daily cycle that is like modern humanity. So if your plan is, well, I'll just do it when I'm 60, that's a bad plan because you're not going to build muscle mass easily there. But if your plan is, I don't care at all what happens, I'm running, I'm not injured, and that's a key point as well. If you're injured a lot and you care about running, strength training would also be helpful, because despite what some 12-week study shows that has no impact on performance, like studies are made for this type of data. And I've been on a tirade on this repeatedly, so I'm not going to go into it super strong there, but it can take months, sometimes years of like very specific hard work to adjust movement preferences. If you've been moving the same way for 40 years and you want to move differently, then you're going to need to put in some like hard, consistent work, and that is not going to be well represented in a 12-week study. But if you're running and you're not injured and you don't care how you move in your 70s, then strength training might not be for you. But seeing as like an hour per week can help you make progress, and seeing as you almost certainly have an hour per week because you're like watching this, and go look at your screen time, it will show you things that I hate looking at. And seeing as most people do really care about how they move in their 70s, even if they don't like to think about it, then we should probably do some lifting, even if it's not your favorite thing. But if you do not care about that, and all you care about is running, and it doesn't matter what happens later, then cool. And then number 3, and this is very real. you have a race in 6 weeks. Some people it might be a little shorter, some people it might be a little longer, but the point is you've been training for a year. So you've been training for a year and you've been working very hard. And this is your A race and there's 6 weeks left and everything's going well and you feel good and it's like good to go. And suddenly somebody tells you need to do strength training. So you go do that and it like messes up your entire thing. That's insane. As much as I think strength training is important, like just wait 8 weeks until you finish the race you've been training for and you've had a couple weeks to recover. That's it. Some people have been trying to get into Western states for years. They haven't been doing strength training. I don't necessarily think that's a great thing overall, but 6 weeks before Western states is not the time to fix that. 6 weeks before UTMB is not the time to start increasing your strength training or like adding or putting new modalities in. And we say the same thing about running. Like you shouldn't be doing anything really new at that point. You should be just looking at a volume peak more than anything else. Like this is not the time to mess it up. So if you are going into a race, especially like we're looking at the start, it's almost August. As we're looking at the start of August, you're going into these fall races. Now might not be the time unless you're struggling with some injury. And then that should probably look more like what you might consider to be PT exercises or physio exercises. But if we're looking at heavy strength improvements and you have 6 weeks to a race that you really care about, and you have not been doing strength training, now is not the time to add it. Personally, I cut it for people, or I cut it down aggressively for people about 4 to 6 weeks anyway, or we swap to something that's much less aggressive. So make sure that you don't screw up your race goals just because someone who may or may not be me on the internet said that strength matters. Anyway, those are three instances where I don't think strength would be important or proper. I realize some of them might sound a little tongue-in-cheek, but I am very serious about all of them. If you're a professional and it's going well, then I think Eliud Kipchoge did like band work mostly. He didn't do a ton of weights. If you don't care about how you move in your 70s and all you care about running and it's going well now, or if you have a race in 6 weeks, and these are not necessarily the time to add things. But otherwise, I think strength training is really important. And if you agree and you don't know how to do it, or you don't know how to integrate it into your program, or you don't know whatever, and you want some advice, please reach out to me. I would love to chat with you about it. I love talking about this stuff, and it's fun. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go have some fun on the trails. I'll be back soon with another one. Thank you again for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Just a reminder, nothing you hear on this podcast is medical advice, and you should always speak with a medical professional before making changes to your training or your nutrition. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please leave a rating or review. It tells the algorithm robots that people like it, and that means more people will hear it. Or even better, just share it with someone who you think would benefit. If you prefer a video version, head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Group on Facebook, or check out the Mountain Goat Endurance Coaching YouTube channel. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great next run.